Hello, welcome to the new episode of Talk Turkey.
Hi, Nevşin. We are all going through a tragedy in the last 2 weeks. Today we'll talk about this too. We'll talk about the post-earthquake Turkey. It's the worst natural disaster in the history of Turkey, actually. Would you like to start maybe with a brief background? I know that you have been to the earthquake region too.
Yes. I mean, we'll probably elaborate more on that, but you said this is the worst ever natural disaster Turkey faced, but the government says this is the worst natural disaster humanity ever faced. So, I mean, so there's a little nuance there. Why they're doing that, probably we can elaborate that a little bit later. But what happened is that, so basically last Sunday, so the exact date is, I'm trying to be very precise, 5th, it was the 6th of February though, very early Monday morning, 4-ish in the morning, we had an earthquake of 7.7 in Kahramanmaraş, Pazarcık, that's the east of Turkey. There was a huge earthquake, and a little bit after that, like I believe like half an hour after that, we had a second big earthquake, 7.8. That's huge, and that's basically one line. You know, geologists would explain this better. A line in this area in the eastern Turkey. 10 cities were hit by the earthquake. The worst hit are the 3 major cities, Kahramanmaraş, Adıyaman, and Hatay. Almost 10 million people are affected by this earthquake. It's terrible. Right after the earthquake, we just hit the road, basically. We went there, and the weather was awful. Weather was terrible. I went to Ankara, so I rent a little car from there. I took my cameraman, and also we took some help with us, you know, something to eat, something, water, because we were hearing nobody had water, basically. There's nothing. These 3 cities collapsed. So we just loaded our car with those, and we hit the road. It was snowing from time to time. And from Ankara, near the highway, some people were stuck there because of the snow. You know, help people who were trying to reach there, help organizations also. They were stuck there for a bit. And then when we went there, it was like a dystopia, basically. It was like nightmare. There was nothing, you know, it's just, I'll show you what Hatay looked like. You know, here's yeah, that's a little bit after, but let me show you like this. Basically, these 3 cities, they're like, yeah, just like that. It's horrible, basically. Yeah, this is something that we shot, as you saw, like one building totally collapsed and it's burning from inside. And I've talked to a friend from Hatay. He lost all his family, his parents there. He went to get their bodies, basically, and he had a similar situation. His parents, basically, I mean, their bodies, they burned in the rubble because it was burning them, because there was nothing. So apparently the scheme, how the help would reach there, the scheme in Turkey of the official institutions is that basically, you know, for example, a terrible disaster happened in Kahramanmaraş. According to the plan, neighboring cities, the help from neighboring cities would reach to this city, right? But since neighboring cities also collapsed, there was no help. For first 2 days, there was nothing. People were trying to like get the rubble off themselves. They were trying to save the loved ones. I've spoken to people. I've just came across a lady. They were like with her sons. They were sitting in front of once it was their house. Now it was totally rubble. They were sitting in front of it around the fire. They lit, trying to warm themselves a little bit because it was freezing also. She said, my husband is inside. We were hearing him until a couple hours ago. Now we cannot hear him anymore. So there was no help, nothing. It was a a huge disaster. It is a disaster. And also, Turkish people saw the state totally failed, literally, you know. Especially under Erdogan, this new narrative is big Turkey, big superpower, power of the region. We don't need anyone. We're self-sufficient. We have everything, you know. We're stronger than anyone in the region. That's the national narrative. This narrative also collapsed because there was no help for like 3-4 days past. People did not really have water to drink. There's still no toilets. It's been more than 10 days. I'm sorry, but people leaving their feces on the ground, because what are you going to do? And now, like, children are having diarrhea. Now we're hearing it's awful, literally.
Yes, I mean it's quite tragic, but I think it was also unique also in terms of the response. I mean, we've seen an incredible level of involvement from the public, civil society organizations, football clubs, journalists, individuals, and there's been a public unity to a large extent. We can say that, and it's extremely important. But this is also one side of the story, because when we examine the political actors, we cannot see this unity, and this is also rather unique. In previous national disasters or major security threats to Turkey, we always had main opposition parties, especially from central left and central right, siding with the government. I mean, talking about unity and solidarity in difficult times, sometimes even echoing the key messages of the government. This time, it was rather different, though. Starting with the main opposition party, central left CHP, the opposition refused to side with the government and took a rather strong position against the AKP and President Erdogan from the first day onwards. They did it while being very active in the earthquake region, starting from the first day. Main opposition leader Kılıçdaroğlu did not even shy away from giving statements together with pro-Kurdish HDP. This has been one of the red lines, taboos of the opposition alliance, maybe until the earthquake. We are always talking about the deep political polarization in Turkey, and this time, this polarization was visible even during a major natural disaster. There's an important political development and policy change from the opposition side. In Turkey, under such circumstances, we always seen messages like, we need unity nowadays, it's not the time to talk about politics, from the opposition side. It didn't happen this time, and actually Kılıçdaroğlu explicitly underlined the fact that this is exactly the time to talk about politics. And he did it by targeting the government openly and in a very harsh way. He has been accusing the government and even threatening also the big construction companies. I see it as a major shift. This, of course, makes more sense taking into account the anger of the public. So probably you started to talk about it, but we need to talk about the perception of the public as well.
Well, first, I mean, so as I said, 10 cities were affected by it. When first the news broke out, we were hearing a lot about Gaziantep, Islahiye. Gaziantep is an AK Party city. The municipality is an AK Party. So it was like there was a lot of help and there was a lot of talk about Gaziantep. Then we started understanding, okay, Gaziantep is hit, Islahiye and Nurda, these provinces, okay, but the real hit cities were other cities. So there is the thing. So now people are questioning. I mean, of course, you cannot prove such a thing, but they're saying, I mean, Hatay, first of all, the municipality is CHP. So Hatay people, when I went there, when I reached there, they said, like, why is nobody talking about Hatay? Why isn't there any help? Is it like the government is punishing us because it's like CHP voters mainly? Hatay, for example, it's a very unique city, very important. It's a mosaic. There are Christians and a Jewish community, and there was the world's oldest Torah, actually. And the Jewish community, they went there and they just confiscated. They took the oldest written Torah. It was moved somewhere else because it was like under danger, obviously, after this earthquake. I mean, as a note. And there are Nusayri, basically Shia Muslims, Arab population, and Turks, Sunni Turks. So it's a mosaic. It's an important city. World's first ever church is there. And on the other hand, Adıyaman and Kahramanmaraş, they're also unique because Adıyaman is mainly an Alawite city. And as probably our viewers, some of them know, Erdogan is a religious Sunni politician. It's very important for him. And Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, the head of CHP, is Alawite. However, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu is a strictly secular person and CHP is a secular party. Sometimes in one of the elections, they were running, in a sense, against each other. In one of his rallies, Mr. Erdogan spoke like he said, well, I want to remind you that he's an Alawite. So to his religious base, he's reminding that he's not one of us, so he does that. He uses these narratives. So that's what's coming from. Basically, Adıyaman is an Alawite city. There are Alawites in Kahramanmaraş. So these people are questioning, are we being punished because we're not voting for, for Hatay's case, not AK Party and others, like, are we being punished because we're Alawites? Why are we being excluded? So there is this talk. Kahramanmaraş, though, it's a very, very AK Party city. 70% voted for AK Party in the last elections. But this time, people started really questioning. I've spoken to people, and one guy literally said, we are freezing, basically. You survive in the earthquake. Okay, you got out of the rubble, but you got out of to a hellish of a situation. There's nothing there. There are no tents. Still, there are not enough tents, and it's freezing, -6, -7, and then there are no toilets, and then there's nothing basically. Yes, now there is food. Food came faster, but then what do you do? And then one guy literally said, "Look at my hands. We're just shitting on the floor, and my hands are covered with feces. We're surviving like animals here." And so I don't want this government to come to me again and ask for a vote. So what is this disaster? What is this? So people are really questioning the government. There's a lot of reaction. And also, as I kind of tried to mention, this has been the opposite of the image AK Party has been creating, putting like brick by brick, like a Jenga game almost, the AK Party, they built this image of strong Turkey, strong Erdogan. He's very capable. He does whatever, he does his hands like this, and everything just will be done very quickly. They're able to of everything. Turkey is strong. So this image literally came down with this disaster in a couple days.
But for everyone, you think, because also when you follow, of course, the pro-government media, you see a completely different image, that the government is managing so well, as this is the biggest ever disaster in the world. It's, of course, impossible to manage it perfectly, but even then the government is there, they're doing their best, and they will be helping everyone. So are people really buying this argument?
That's a very good question, very fair question. So what the government, state and government sort of intertwined, unfortunately, now in Turkey, that's going to be also a problem in the forthcoming decades, I believe, or years. So what happened is basically the state was paralyzed. The help did not reach people. People died under the rubble. They died of hypothermia. They froze to death. Disaster. But what the government did, they came up. We have this Bureau of Communications under the presidency, right? So they started working really hard. First, they came up with this narrative, the disaster of the century. They made a video. They started sharing it on social media, making it viral. It's basically saying, wow, this is the biggest earthquake the world has ever seen. So nobody could have done anything. If this happened in Germany, Germany would totally collapse. If this happened in England, England would not exist, would cease to exist, and that sort of a narrative. They started sharing this video. However, there was a reaction towards this video. People got really angry. People were like, what are you saying? People, you just first save people, leave this alone, and then they had to retweet the video. So for the first time, actually, they're doing something, and then they're taking a step back when there's a lot of reaction. They totally look paralyzed. In terms of how they're governing Turkey, basically. But then what they did, it's not even tragic. I don't know how to say that. Then they took the Bureau of Communications. They took these government-friendly influencers, basically, to the area, to the earthquake zone, and they started making videos like, that there are these traitors are accusing the government, but there you see we have tents here, there you see there is water here. So they started publishing that sort of videos, which looked even more tragic because, what are you doing? Some influencer woman there. What are they doing there with all makeup and stuff? It looked totally ridiculous. But obviously there are these government channels. And yes, there are people watching those channels, and some people, they only watch those channels, and they believe in the propaganda there are. But the thing is, this mechanism, this propaganda mechanism, seems to be weakening, especially with this disaster.
And probably social media plays a role too. I mean, the term disinformation is used in a very different context also nowadays. I mean, many of those messages you underlined, they were also accused of being disinformation by the government side. So they even actually blocked Twitter for 12 hours. Maybe it's also good to mention, because social media from the first hours onwards, I think, was really the key platform, both for people to follow the developments, but also even for the search and rescue operations as well. And then we saw suddenly that the blocking Twitter decision came out, and then it lasted around 12 hours. So, and then the government had to step back and change this. And I feel like it's also one of the strategies of the current government is like testing the waters. They take some steps to see the reactions from the public, and then they decide whether they should take further action or use even a similar strategy any other time. So I think blocking Twitter was one of those, and the reaction was huge. So they had to restore it. There's a lesson also for them, hopefully. Sometimes we overestimate social media in Turkey because it is still a bubble, a big bubble, but still a bubble. But sometimes we also underestimate the power of it. So facing harsh criticism on social media, the government was forced to back down, I mean, so many times. And the list is long, and it's been actually growing very fast recently. This is, of course, a political indicator too. It shows us that they feel the declining support, and they are trying to follow the public opinion even more closely. So, and mentioning the declining support to AKP, I think it would also make sense to talk about the consequences of the earthquake and how it has been managed for domestic politics and upcoming elections too. Mm-hmm. Would you like to start?
Sure, of course. Now there's this talk if the elections are going to be postponed, because the normal date for elections is 18th of June. But Erdogan came out before this earthquake. He came over and he said, we want to have the elections on 14th of May because June is like people are going to holiday, this and that, So he said, 14th of May is a more proper date. So basically people were getting ready for 14th of May, but now it seems it's not be possible. The opposition said, Meral Akşener, the chair of E-Party, she said, it looks like 14th of May is going to be impossible. So the elections will be on 18th of June. But there's another kind of important-ish figure in Turkish politics, Bülent Arınç. He's one of the founders of the AK Party. He's not in the close circle of Mr. Erdogan anymore, but he's one of the seasoned politicians, close to AK Party voters, maybe in a sense. So he came up and he made a statement on his Twitter account, and he said, "Well, I mean, obviously, this is not in the constitution, because according to Turkish constitutions, there's only one condition that the elections could be postponed. It is if the Turkish state is in a state of war with another country. That's
and even then with the decision of the parliament.
Yeah. So he said, yes, I know this is not constitutional, but we should basically change the law. Change the law, and for once this election should be postponed. So he started this discussion, this argument. The opposition is saying a big no, because the opposition, they think, a bit like people, opinion makers, opinion leaders, they also point out, they say, if we pave a way to postpone elections in Turkey, this is going to be, in a sense, Pakistanization of Turkey, and this is going to become normal. This will set a precedent. Now this will be because of the earthquake. A year later, maybe we'll have a couple terror attacks, and then this will be another excuse to postpone the elections. So the elections should not be postponed under any circumstances, and the constitution should not be changed. We should abide by the constitution. This is the stance of the opposition. Mr. Erdogan has not said anything to Mr. Arınç's proposal just yet. So, AK Party spokesperson Ömer Çelik said, "Well, postponing the election is not in our agenda. We're now trying to basically amend, after the earthquake, we're trying to get back to normal life and trying to survive people, rescue people alive. So that's what we're trying to do. We're not talking about elections anymore." So I think they're just assessing what to do, because postponing the elections right now, I mean, kind of, if you saw these cities, you'd say, how are the elections going to take place? How on earth? That's also another problem. But on the other hand, this will have economic repercussions. So according to some analysts, they say postponing the elections might not be the best choice for Mr. Erdogan, because probably from a year from now, the economy in Turkey will be worse than today. So postponing the elections might not save him. It could have a vice versa effect.
And also, I mean, in my opinion, political legitimacy has always been very important for the president as well. I mean, there may be major issues in terms of democracy, but he has always been proud of having the support of the majority, having this free election so that he was elected by people. So I think also postponing it would damage one more main pillars of this image as well. So that's also why I think it's a bit tricky. And of course, we don't know. I mean, we'll probably see the first post-earthquake opinion polls in the next weeks to see the shift, if there is one. However, we should note that after 1999 earthquake, we saw major consequences of this earthquake for Turkish politics. I mean, some of these political parties which were in governing coalition at that time, they don't even exist anymore. And this also played a role in AKP's success in 2002 elections. In a similar way, this earthquake can also reshape the Turkish politics. It's also about the perception. That's why the communication machinery of the government is doing its best nowadays to show that the government is managing this major crisis well, and there's no issue of mismanagement. I have major doubts about whether these messages are consumed by majority of people, but I still believe that we always talk about this like 25-30% really like staunch supporters of President Erdogan. Probably they continue to believe, but I don't know if they're enough to win the next elections. And government, on the other hand, may also need time to show this, because they are talking about rebuilding the cities. And in Turkey, especially with the construction, in good or bad way, but Turkey can construct rather quickly. And they may also want to show at least some progress. And I think that was also one of the reasons behind that statement coming from Bülent Arınç, to test the waters as well, to see the reactions as well. I mean, whether the public would be happy with that, whether it's possible. But I think the huge reaction to this suggestion from the opposition parties and public made it also a bit more difficult. I think it was a useful move. I don't know whether he was asked by the AKP or not, but I think his letter, because we are talking about 2 pages. I mean, this was on Twitter, but 2 pages. So I think it was useful to understand the reaction coming from the public as well. This is about domestic politics, and we will probably talk about the consequences of the earthquake in the coming months as well. But there are also major consequences for Turkish foreign policy. I mean, we have seen anti-West, anti-EU, anti-Greece, anti-Sweden, etc. sort of discourse recently. And we were even expecting rising tensions and crises ahead of the elections. This government has always been using foreign policy and tensions very well for domestic political purposes. And this would also be used for the upcoming elections. We have seen also the signs of it, but this was until the earthquake. Following the earthquake, we have seen unprecedented support from the international community, especially from the West, but particularly from countries like Greece, Israel, and even Armenia. So this has also changed the public perception, at least to a certain extent. There is a famous cliche in Turkey: Turks have no other friends beside Turks. And many people have realized that maybe this cliche is not true. I mean, support from Greece, including genuine solidarity of the public in Greece, huge amount of support from Israel. As far as I remember, it was the second biggest team in rescue operations. And even minor support coming from Armenia has caused so many question marks. And I believe they also play a role in changing the dynamics. So they may still try it, but using tensions in foreign policy may not be a very useful campaign tool this time for this upcoming elections. It's also clear that people don't want tensions anymore. They want normalization. They just want to normalize their lives. I mean, they have enough problems and they don't need and they don't want new problems. Turkey has huge problems. I believe that the general mood in the public is, let's focus on our real problems. So we'll, of course, wait and see whether this trend will continue. But also going back to, again, to 1999 earthquake, it also played a major role in foreign policy, and we saw a similar shift there as well. Rapprochement with Greece and eventually a rapprochement with the EU, including major steps towards the membership, was there. So we may wait and see whether the similar trends will be there, but we can expect meaningful policy changes, especially after the elections.
I agree. One thing, for the first time, Armenia, I mean, in years, in like a decade, Turkey-Armenian border was opened, and some humanitarian help from Armenia reached Turkey. And the Armenian foreign minister came to Turkey and met with Mr. Çavuşoğlu, his Turkish counterpart, and they decided, this symbolic but important, to mend the bridge, Ani Bridge, a historic bridge. Together, basically. That's symbolically very important. Israel was very active. They sent IDF, they were in the rescue operations, the rescue missions. Then they opened a big hospital for the ones who survived after the earthquake. That was important. And the Greek foreign minister came and he said, well, there's no need to be enemies anymore. So these messages were exchanged. One thing, though, NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, he also came to Turkey. And of course, he said, while we're with you, we're supporting you, these. But then he said, in between the lines, he said, well, we believe it's time for Finland and Sweden to finally officially join NATO. We don't see any reason to keep them waiting anymore. So he's basically saying, Turkey, okay, I mean, let's do business. Let's just please don't keep them pending and stuff. That's important. Maybe Turkey might change its policy towards Finland and Sweden, because Turkey was insistent they were to hold this card and get whatever they can. I don't think they will be able to do that anymore, because Turkey is going to need the money and credit, basically, to rebuild these cities. That'll be important. Those cities, they consisted 9% of Turkish GDP. And or around 14% of agricultural production. These are agricultural cities. This will be important, rebuilding them. And all the production there stopped, basically. Gaziantep is a major important industrial city. Industry there stopped for like more than a week. So this will cost Turkey a lot. And to get back on its feet, Turkey is going to need support, both financial and political. So I also expect, even before the elections, a foreign policy shift, even from this government. I mean, I believe, because Erdogan, even, let me show you his face. This is the first time he spoke after the earthquake, a couple days after that. He looks really angry. He looked really angry. And I think he sounds fragile also. It's not like he doesn't yell and scold around people. Not that. He really looks angry. Here he looks really angry, but he sounds kind of disappointed and fragile in a sense. I don't know. What's your take?
I mean, you mentioned the need for the financial support, but also there were rather tragicomic developments in the last few days as well, including Turkish Central Bank donating money to Turkish state, and Turkish state banks donating money, sort of. So it is also like part of this entire, I think, propaganda machinery. So they need to and the president needs to show that they're on it, they will do it quickly, they have financial means to do it, and the entire thing is a part of it. And of course, the government understands that it's not going to be easy. The trends are really in different direction. Things are shifting, and they cannot control things anymore. And that's also why I think there is a level of disappointment and anger, because president and the party, they've been controlling almost everything in the country for last 21 years, but they feel like their control is not maybe as strong as before. So this is also probably a moment of disappointment, but also panicking that things might be changing.
Exactly. And we will be following up on Talk Turkey, right?
Yes. Till next time.
Till next time.